Madam Secretary, dear Mrs. Obama, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your kind words and attention. Secretary Clinton, I accept this award on behalf of all women of Kyrgyzstan who struggle from the day to day to make their voices heard. This award belongs to those who, despite their condition, rise above and demand respect to their human dignity. Be it in big politics, when a woman stands up to a dictator, or it is in a domestic situation, when she refuses to accept violence and humiliation. What we have celebrating today, the courage, is one of the same quality and scale. Many millions of women do not have the fame and publicity that I enjoyed in my political career. It is so to these nameless but truly heroic women that I dedicate this award and most humbly pledge to continue my work for the cause of social justice and the rule of law. It is also a great honor to share this award with this distinguished group of women activists from around the planet. It is really inspiring to be here and hear your amazing stories. Madam Secretary, a year ago today, on March 8th, International Women's Day, I stood in a square of Bishkek near the monument of Urkuyas Aliyeva, a heroine of Kyrgyz women emancipation. I had invited fellow members of parliament, civic activists, human rights defenders, and youth leaders to that square to mark the International Women Solidarity Day. The idea was simple: to come to a public space together on a public holiday. What could be less threatening than a group of women, some with their children in strollers, coming together to celebrate? A year ago in my country, it was very dangerous. You were risking a lot to initiate or participate in anything resembling a public protest. When less than a dozen activists showed up, I could not blame any of my friends and colleagues who chose to stay home that day. We all lived in fear. The usual news in my country was about political killings, attacks against journalists, jailing, persecution of opposition leaders, shutting down of the independent newspapers and websites. It was on April 7 last year that the youth of the country said enough to silently watch the very meager national resources be stolen by the corrupt dictatorial family. We paid a very dear price to liberate our nation. More than 80 young people choose to die rather than to continue to live in fear. The interim government that was formed by the opposition on that day focused on efforts not to squander the liberty that we achieved. We knew that it was not enough just to depose the dictator. We had to rebuild the country on the principles of rule of law and democracy. Within 3 months, we held a national referendum to approve the new constitution that transformed the country into the first parliamentary democracy in the region. We then provided for political parties, including those that were opposed to us or even directly represented interests of the past regime, compete freely in the parliamentary elections. For the first time in our history, the people of Kyrgyzstan elected its own governments. While the difficulties remain, and we have many challenges ahead of us, we remain proud and optimistic. Yes, when you are a dictatorship, it is very easy to create the artificial picture of stability and harmony. When you have a democracy, you must learn to accept many voices, some of them very critical, some even insulting. To the outsiders, it looks like you are about to collapse every minute. But it is via this active dialogue and public debate that we can find compromise and pursue what is best for the national interest. We may look more in disarray today when we were a year ago, but most certainly we are much stronger as a state and as a people. Madam Secretary, dear friends and colleagues, I want to share with you two ideas of the occasion of today's International Women's Solidarity Day. This day was pronounced 100 years ago by social democratic women leaders in Europe. I was named after one of them, Rosa Luxemburg, although some of their Although some of their theories may have been flawed, it is to their idea of liberating and empowering women that I owe my education and the fact that I was blessed with so many opportunities in this life. What I am concerned with today is that we see a lot of achievements in the area of women's rights being eroded now and scaled back. It breaks my heart to see young women and girls in the region not to have the same rights and opportunities that we, their mothers, had. Yes, we can see a lot of progress in public awareness from the time 15 years ago, when I saw you, Secretary Clinton, famously declaring in Beijing, human rights are women's rights. Women's rights are human rights. However, when it comes to the reality in many places of the world remains disappointing and even worsening. I think I'm talking about the same phenomenon that was discussed by President Obama in his book, The Audacity of Hope, how Indonesia of his childhood has become a very different place now. Why is that? I ask you. There is a lot of talk about export of democracies. You always see newspapers discuss how the developed West is supposedly trying to impose its own values on the rest of the humanity. However, nobody talks about the different kind of export, how billions of dollars are spent by some powerful and obviously very rich outside forces for programs that aim to re-enslave women, to deny them their rights and freedoms. Ideology of religious extremism disseminates intolerance towards representatives of other religions and ethnicities. It refuses to see women as equally important and rightful members of the society. The time has come that we stop shying away from confronting those in our own countries and internationally who declare women as inferior creatures. The historic times that we are witnessing in the Middle East and elsewhere should really serve as a call for action. Young girls everywhere, not only in such countries as Kyrgyzstan or Afghanistan, should have equal access to education, employment, full scale of political and social rights. They deserve nothing less than that. It is not enough to liberate societies without liberating and empowering every individual of that society. There won't be any justice. Madam Secretary, dear Mrs. Obama, in many languages, I can talk mostly certainly in the Kyrgyz and in Russian, the notion of courage has very strong masculine terms. Historically, And culturally, for much of the recent history, only men supposedly could be brave. Of course, these men who wrote the history books prefer to forget about the period of matriarchy, when we know that it was the women who ruled the planet. I want to thank you, Secretary Clinton, for continuing these words that redefines the word courage in very feminine terms. I'm very proud to be a woman, a mother, a daughter, and a sister. I'm very proud to be here today and receive this word. Happy March 8th.